Welcome back to another episode of the Daft on Draft podcast. I am your co-host, Corey Kinnan, once again with your co-host, Dalton Miller. Dalton, welcome back from your European adventures. How was it?
Listen, it was okay. Dublin, the food scene was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, so that was nice. Everyone was very nice in Ireland. And London is just, a big city, kind of New York-ish, and it's just not really my kind of vibe. We went out to the Cotswolds. I was out in the country. It was beautiful. It was small, old towns, and that was really, really cool. But I am very excited to be back, very excited to be nesting, very excited for week 0 of college football coming up, and the rest of the college football season, because that's what I'm excited about as a football fan this year.
Oh, yeah. By the time this episode drops, week 0 will be over. The big matchup, obviously, is Florida State versus Georgia Tech. Obviously, it doesn't do us a lot of good to talk about it on this podcast because, it'll be done by the time we're there. But I know you're you've kind of got some hopes of DJU becoming that senior upperclassman who is drafted to be that future backup quarterback, like the Jake Haener type, like the Spencer Rattler type, that type of quarterback in this year's class. So we'll see how DJU does it as third school. The portal era is wild.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. It's crazy to keep track of all this, but
yes.
And then especially if you're a grad transfer, you can do it again for free without sitting out. And it's just like, oh, there's so many rules. But that is something to keep an eye on. But we've talked about some corners a little bit. We've talked about Travis Hunter ad nauseum on this podcast. Today we're going to talk about offensive tackles. Next week we'll get into some wide receivers and I think running backs. We're going to get into some running backs next week too. But we're going to start with offensive tackles today. Dalton and I are in agreement that this is not the class of 2020. This is not the class of 2024. This class, if you need a tackle, you better hope to have a top 10 pick and get one of the first 2 guys. I know a lot of people really love the third guy that's usually mentioned in that crop, but I haven't had a chance to talk to Dalton, so we'll get his opinions on the third guy as well. But I'm not as high in or in love with the third guy that's usually mentioned with the top 2, but we'll get into that. So we don't need much of a segue. Obviously, most people, when they talk about this offensive tackle class, they start at LSU, and they start with both of those guys. They typically, however, will start with Will Campbell, the left tackle.
Yeah, I need to interject immediately.
Yeah, go for it.
Here. I was very surprised when I heard that, because I saw Dane's top 50 drop after watching those 2. I saw kind of a lot of people talking on Twitter about Campbell over Jones, and I was very surprised by it, because when I watch them, I say, you know what? I think you can make an argument that right now Campbell is a better football player than Jones is, but I think as a prospect and as an NFL player, I think it's pretty clear who I'm taking first as a tools type of guy, because one of them has clearly better tools. And not to mention, this isn't a situation where you have like an older guy who might be a little bit less athletic or doesn't quite have the length and is just a perfect player, because I don't think Campbell's a perfect player either. Mm-hmm. He's somebody who has legitimate flaws, and so does Jones, but I am much more willing, especially now before the football season starts, to bet on that athletic upside and that physical ability rather than just, being a slightly better player maybe today.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement there as well. I've been on this movement since like March, April. I had a buddy who was a staffer. He now works in the NFL. He was a staffer at LSU. Has also said, like, you should see this dude in the weight room. You should see this dude work out. He's a different beast. Speaking of Emery Jones, that is the right tackle for LSU. So Will Campbell, left tackle LSU. Dane Brugler's top tackle. Most people's consensus top tackle. Dalton and I, and there are a few others. There are dozens of us from the Arrested Development meme where there's dozens of us. There are dozens of us out there who stand firm that we actually believe Emery Jones is the better of the 2 prospects for a lot of what Dalton said, and it shows up on tape in legitimate ways. I was texting Dalton off off of the air, and I've actually tweeted about it as well, that like who I see when I watch Emery Jones is literally a spitting image of a guy who was drafted in the first round in 2022. He's an all-pro guard now. He was a tackle at Tulsa, all-pro guard for the Dallas Cowboys now, Tyler Smith. And a lot of people think Emery Jones might have to play guard as well. I don't see that, but I think he could also, in the same way that Tyler Smith kind of plays both. You know, if the Cowboys need him to play left tackle, he'll kick out. I think you can see that transition as well. But I see a like almost spitting image of Tyler Smith, and in the main way that I see that is in his core strength and his ridiculous flexibility. Like Tyler Smith's Tulsa tape is littered with him getting hit with a bull rush. Like he would get hands in his chest and dudes would almost bend him over backwards like a rubber band, and he would still find a way to anchor in. He would still find a way to, like, his hips were ridiculous flexible, like where he would be bent over backwards, but still he wasn't giving up ground. And I see that same kind of way with Emery Jones, where no, he is not perfect technically. No, he is not a perfect prospect, a perfect offensive tackle. I think his lower half can get a little clunky. You know, I think his hands, for better or worse, are hit or miss. But any sort of funky situation that he can get himself into, and that's in the Alabama game there's a rep against Chris Braswell where Braswell gets into his chest and Jones gives up a step or two, and Jones just has this way of finding out he's able to square his upper body back up with Braswell and just cut, like almost again like a tree in a hurricane. How trees like bend over backwards in a hurricane, anchor in out of this wildly funky position, and that kind of recovery ability I think is extremely valuable. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to say that he is an elite prospect because he obviously isn't. But when you look at this draft class, how many elite prospects are there? 2, 3? So when I look at him, like you said, the flexibility was a big thing. And that rep against Chris Braswell is one that really stood out to me because you can see the technical deficiencies in his game, but also see the ridiculous athletic traits in his game as well. And you brought up Tyler Smith and his flexibility and his core strength. And there's a coordination that both of them have that is phenomenal. Now, Tyler Smith might be a little bit more naturally powerful as a blocker as well, but Tyler Smith was much more of a ball of clay than Jones is. I think Jones is better technically. I did not like Tyler Smith's tape at Tulsa. You could see the athleticism. You could see the power. I was not happy with that draft pick either. Obviously, he turned into an all-pro left guard, so you have to be happy about it at this point. And when you go to Dallas and Dallas drafts you as an offensive lineman, you have to give them grace because they've done so well drafting and developing offensive linemen. But when you look at Jones, he's somebody who, you're right, it's just naturally stout anchor. The anatomical length is fantastic. Lower body drive, finishing ability is there. And then, like you said, the rare flexibility. And that's really what you see from him. There's obvious shortcomings with his game technically, but there's no perfect offensive tackle in this class. And honestly, when you're looking at it, you look at the guys drafted last year, all Fuaga, Faltano, Fashanu. We can throw Latham out because I think that I would take guys over Latham in this class. But even Mims and Barton, we might be 6 or 7 deep before I even consider one of the offensive tackles in this class. And that just goes to show not every single draft class is going to have 50 guys who are, top 25, top 30 talents.
Yeah.
This is a class that might have 25 top 50 talents.
Yeah. That's the thing.
It just is what it is.
Yeah. And it's so funny how and it's not, this isn't a dig at the common draft follower or the common NFL follower. You'd be like, oh, I only have 15 first round grades. You're like, well, you suck at this. Then there's 32 picks. It's like, well, that's not how this works. Some classes, there'll be 9 first round grades. Usually there aren't over 20. I would say 20 is probably a really good draft class if you have 20 first round picks.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's going to be the case this year. And most of them who do are going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Yes. And so that's just something to keep in mind as we work through this class and through this podcast and through all of these.
And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't pay attention to the draft either.
Correct.
Because now you might have to pay attention to it even more to be able to find those diamonds in the rough, because there will be guys who are being talked about as day 3 guys who were like, well, he might be like a top 75 guy.
Yeah.
And he plays at Sam Houston State.
Yeah, and was that a certain dig at a certain cornerback that Tampa Bay drafted a couple of years ago?
No, it
Or
actually wasn't.
okay,
I was
okay.
just bringing up a
Oh.
random smaller school.
That's funny. That's funny. But yeah, that's like, especially this past year. This next year is not going to be as much because the COVID rules are starting to wind down a
Yeah.
lot. But like last year's class was literally the smallest draft class in NFL history because every underclassman is going back to school. If they're getting enough NIL money, or if these guys are fifth, sixth years and they have an extra year of eligibility and they know they're not going to get drafted, then they're also going to go back to school. So again, that's winding down now that these COVID era eligibility requirements are out the window now. Thankfully, I couldn't. It was so hard to track and follow, but
Yeah.
Especially in a class like last year, it's like, okay, there's legitimately 400 guys in this class. So like some guys who I would give a 7th round grade to might go top 150. They might go top 100, depending on how some teams value their position and their athletic ability. So that's absolutely something to consider. But again, kind of got off track there. Back to Emery. I think we did a good job of breaking down Emery and why we think that we've been talking about the wrong LSU offensive tackle. And that's not to say that Will Campbell is a bad prospect, because he's not. But there are some real shortcomings that I think put him as a historical outlier. And there has been
that on purpose.
No, but that's really good. That's where I was getting at, though, because I think in the past we have kind of overlooked some of those outliers if the tape is really good. And Campbell has good tape. I wouldn't say it's really good like the guy I'm about to mention that went 10th overall to the Bengals in 2020. And Jonah Williams. Like Jonah Williams, in terms of technical refinement, was as good of an offensive tackle that you could find. Yeah. His arms were also 32 inches long. Rashawn Slater had 33 inches long, so he's not quite there. And Rashawn had a dynamic rookie season, and he's been kind of banged up since. But so he's not there. But like, so I wouldn't throw him in this category. But like, I think Will Campbell is going to get Jonah Williams, and I think he probably deserves to get Jonah Williams a little bit in this regard.
Yeah. His biggest issues for me were against length, and he just can't do anything about it. Physically, he can't do anything about it. He does the best that he can to maximize his anatomical length, and he does so without getting out of position. A lot of guys with shorter arms like him are going to kind of overextend and bend at the waist a little bit to try to maximize what they have. He doesn't really do that, but he does a really good job of maximizing what he has. It's just not enough against a defensive end with 35-inch arms. It's not enough against a guy who can really convert speed to power. When I watch him, there's a lot of things technically that I love. I love how seamless his hip swivel is. He seals rush lanes so well at the first level, climbing to the second level. His angles, his anchor point in pass pro is fantastic. He gets everything correct that you want him to get correct.
If he's frame to frame. Yeah.
If he's frame to frame. I think that Jones is a much more explosive athlete than he is. And at the end of the day, you're going to be playing guys who are 260 with 35-inch arms who can run through your face. And that's going to be an issue for him at offensive tackle.
Yeah. Again, we were texting off the air, and I told you, I was like, I think the theme of this like class, this offensive tackle class, is like, I think he'd be a great guard though. And like, that's how I legitimately feel about Will Campbell, because it's very evident that he is ox strong. Like it's the Bill Belichick thing too, where like they joke that Bill Belichick just goes to the combine to scout people's asses. Like he just looks at people's asses at the combine. Will Campbell has a freaking dumpster. So like he is stout and he is ox strong. Nobody, if he is frame to frame, I don't think I saw anybody beat him through his chest. I don't think I saw anybody beat him through his chest.
No, he gets beat. No, when he gets beat,
it's outside shoulder.
It's outside shoulder. It's on an obvious passing down. You know, 3rd and 12 is when he is getting beat, and it's because he just can't get to the chest.
Yeah. I mean, again, the everything else. I mean, not everything else, but like the grip strength is phenomenal. I think his hands are really refined. There's a lot to really like, but in addition to length, which is a very, very obvious outlier. Like, again, Jonah Williams, we tried to do this with Jonah Williams, and the Bengals still took him in the top 10, and he's on a second team. And I mean, he's an average NFL tackle. So if you can hit on an average NFL tackle, that's still a really good outcome.
And
that's still a really good outcome.
And in this class, it might be a really great outcome.
Right. And he got a second contract. Like, he got paid on a second contract. So, like, that's the ultimate goal, right? From an agent perspective, even from a player perspective, is lock up that long-term security, get that second contract. And he did that. So, like, there's nothing wrong, but like Jonah Williams wasn't, I mean, people had him as like their 1.1 at some points, like at different points in the process. Like, this is the best player in the draft. And I think when we have an outlier, like, I have been told that Will Campbell has verified 32-inch arms, like, you have to pay attention to that. Which makes me think, like, this guy's an all-pro guard. Like, he could be an all-pro guard, but as a tackle, he's definitely not the best in the class. And I'd be really wary of taking him in the top 10. But if you could tell me, I'm sure you're still going to get a league average tackle, I think he's probably still worth the top 15, 20 pick just based on NFL draft trends, right? But there's a lot there. And I think another thing athletically that I struggle with is I question his knee bend at times. So, like, not only does he give up outside shoulder, but I don't think he has the ability to match pad level as effectively as Emery or as some of these other athletic tackles.
And not just that, but the ability to recover when you do lose the arc.
Right. Yeah. And so, again, we're not saying Will Campbell is overrated or overhyped or whatever. Like, I guess we kind of are, but like, we're not trashing Will Campbell.
No, not at all.
I think both of us would very consensusly say Will Campbell's the second best offensive tackle in this class. So I would say that too.
And honestly, like, when we talk about it, he might be the best offensive tackle in this class right now. But again, when we're talking about NFL draft prospects, I think that it is clearly Jones is the better prospect.
Yes. Higher ceiling. Get that guy in an NFL offensive tackle room. Let him work with an offensive line coach at the NFL level. He's got the stuff. The third guy that is typically thrown into the mix, I've seen him as high as OT1, but he's typically in that same tier for a lot of people in the draft community, is Texas's Kelvin Banks. I have been pretty vocal that, boy, I don't see it, but that's one person we haven't talked about at the year. I don't know how you feel about Kelvin Banks, Dalton. So what are your thoughts on Kelvin Banks?
One of the more complex evaluations in this class, I'm sure. And that it comes down to Steve Sarkisian's offense. Mm-hmm. How many times do we ever get to actually see him in a 45-degree set? We never, ever see him in a vertical set. It's just the way that offense runs. They want to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. They move the pocket around a ton. It is an amazing offense. I love Texas's offense. Quinn Ewers, being the guy running it, doesn't do as much as, Mac Jones. But I think that when you look at an offensive tackle for the University of Texas right now, you have to ask how much of what he's doing at Texas translates to the NFL level, because it's not a whole lot. And that just throws a complete curveball into an evaluation that is already really muddled or muddy because there's so much inconsistency in the things that he does do. I think he's an incredibly impressive run blocker when he stays within himself. Mm-hmm. But just like we're going to talk about with some other guys in this class, these guys just aren't staying within themselves enough. Another thing that I like, but is also a weakness of his, is he likes to mix up his hands. He likes to mix up his striking, but he's not very good at it. And so it's tough because you really want to like it. And there's a lot to say, to look at Banks and be like, yo, he could be OT1 if he cleans some things up, and you see him in vertical sets a little bit more often. You see him in 45-degree sets and in a real passing attack. I like the way that he climbs the ladder. I think he's got good timing and angles at the second level. I think that he has a strong feel for positional leverage in the run game. He generates easy movement, but he's also a bit of a waist bender. He's a little bit impatient, and he really tries to get up under his skis, and he ends up, losing his balance. And God, there's a lot to like with Banks, and you can see it. But even more than Jones, is just not there yet. And you hope it gets there, but from a technical perspective, from a consistency perspective, because as an offensive lineman and as an offensive tackle specifically, you can be good 90% of the time. You can be amazing 90% of the time. You can be great on 45 snaps out of 50. But if you screw the pooch on 5 snaps in a game, you are a bad offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way that position is.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, he's got to get the consistency up, but you can definitely squint and see a potential OT1.
Yeah, I have my little scouting notebook out in front of me for those of you who listen, the 3 of you who listen to this on YouTube. And like Dalton was talking, it's like, yep. Hands latch wide, waist bender tendencies as a run blocker. Speed can give him fits in the outside shoulder. Does he have a counter to throw? Can he get wide? Literally just boom, boom, boom. Yeah. But again, what is very evident is he has unbelievable brute strength. Like his punch is massive. He generates massive movement in the run game. Once he gets latched, his grip strength is through the roof. He is unbelievably strong. But right now, it's all upper body, I think, because again, his base is pretty wishy-washy. Mm-hmm. We have a question mark about, can he set wide? Like, what is his foot speed like when he sets wide? Because even when he's jump setting, or even when he kicks out of his set, like I don't necessarily see a great athlete. I think sometimes his feet come across as really heavy, which like furthers that projection. Like, well, can he, if he even if he's asked to, like, is this something he can do well? Again, he's dense, like Will Campbell. He's very dense.
Yeah.
Belichickian wise there. He's very dense. And so there is a lot to like, but he leaves even more question marks than Will Campbell, in my opinion. Even more question marks than Will Campbell.
And that's the thing, is there's an ability to bet and believe in upside to an extent. There is a realistic, hey, this guy can get there. We talk about it all the time with quarterbacks, and like, why is this guy inaccurate at the college level? Is it because of a mechanical issue? Is it just his feet? Or is it generally he is decent in his lower half? He sequences well, but he just can't get the ball to where it needs to go. Or is it something that is fixable? And what is fixable and what isn't fixable? And what are things that are easier historically to fix than not? Yeah. And that's what you have to try to bet on at the next level.
Mm-hmm. And I talked about this in my What to Watch For when scouting offensive line with Brandon Thorne, when I did that series for this podcast, about one area that I've been burned with offensive tackles. Evan Neal is a huge one. It's why I didn't like J.C. Latham very much. Both Alabama guys, really funny. But is balance and base. Like, if your base, like, I got burned on Evan Neal because like this guy's a freak athlete at his size. He can move so well. His punch is massive. His base was awful, terrible. And I thought when he got to an NFL room, this is something that can be fixed. And once he fixes it, he's going to be the best, like one of the best tackles in the NFL. Well, guess what?
But it's just that natural movement ability, and you can't,
his
like,
base
you
still
can't work your
terrible.
way out of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have the same fears about J.C. Latham, which is why I was not as high on Latham as some other people. And you've mentioned those same concerns about Latham. So it's where I get a little concerned with Banks. I don't think Banks' base is as bad as Evan Neal's was.
Yeah.
I mean, Evan Neal's base, like, he was on the ground very frequently in his Alabama tape. But again, I overlooked it all because, like, extremely powerful. His movement skills were unbelievable. At like 6'6", 360 pounds, like, this dude's doing this at this size. I'm over, like, that's fine. Put him in a like, but it didn't come to fruition. And now that's something that I'm weary of when I'm scouting offensive tackles. Like, well, this historically hasn't been corrected on guys I thought they could correct it. So makes me a little bit skittish on Banks. Next guy is someone that we have disagreements on where he translates to the next level. I think I very firmly see him as a guard. I think he could play tackle. But you said, like, I think he's a tackle. So I'm not going to butcher this pronunciation. We played it before we got on. Jonah Savaiinaea from Arizona, who I think is better than the Arizona.
I think you said it was Savaiinaea.
Savaiinaea, you're right. Savaiinaea, yeah, you're right. I already butchered it. Sorry, Jonah. But who I think is a better offensive lineman than the Arizona one who just got drafted in the first round by the Packers this past spring.
Ooh, you do think he's better?
I do.
Okay. See, I was a fan of Jordan Morgan. I had a second round grade on him, but I graded him as a guard.
Okay.
I thought he was a guard. It turns out he's a guard. So there is, and that's the thing. Like, there are some guys that I think can play offensive tackle. There's some guys who I think could be better fits as guards, and it kind of comes down to what your issues are at offensive tackle. And for Morgan, I thought that his issues would be mitigated by moving to the inside and just working in less space, because I felt like when defenders had space, they were able to kind of overcome him a little bit more often. And for me, when I look at somebody like Savaiinaea, I look at him more like I did Talise Fuaga. Now, I'm not saying that he is Fuaga, because Fuaga to me was an outrageous prospect. I loved him.
Mm-hmm.
But you see a lot of the similarities in the extreme violence that he has as a run blocker on the first and second level. And this is partially why you say, hey, he can absolutely be a guard as well. But what I saw from him was extreme explosiveness out of his stance in 45-degree sets. Like, for his size, because he's another big offensive tackle, I was really surprised at how agile he was and how explosive he was out of his set. The problem is he consistently oversets and gets beat inside very easily. He consistently loses his half-man relationship, and it's almost like he wants to get out of his stance so explosively and get to his set point so quickly that he just doesn't even think about what that edge rusher is actually doing. And now when you're defending speed on the outside, it's fantastic because he just absolutely stonewalls you. But if you have any sort of inside counter whatsoever, he's going to get beat. And you saw it against Latu. In the UCLA game, you saw it a lot more on, especially inside spin moves as well, because he's got a good, I think he's got a good strike zone overall. But when you get to that level and you get the spin move down and he kind of strikes that outside shoulder and it's a glancing blow, he also doesn't have the ability right now with his hands or with his lower body to get back to that mirror and counter that on the inside as well. And so for his issues, yes, probably best if he doesn't have to deal with that much space on the outside. Mm-hmm. But if you can just get him to control how explosively he comes out of his stance, I think that you can see an NFL right tackle.
So that was like the theme of my notes are that he's just out of control.
Yeah.
Because he's I think he's just trying to kill everybody.
And I love watching him play. Yeah.
I think he's trying to kill everybody because it's not just his sets. Like he does overset quite a bit, but I think he's just over aggressive. Like he's just trying to hurt the man across from him, because even in the run game, I think he has a lot of whiff blocks where I think he's just putting his head down and he's just trying to run through the man across from him. And so I saw a lot of whiff blocks. I saw, let me look at my notes. Like his leg drive is really evident, but like I think he falls off blocks a lot because again, he's not out of control within himself to like really latch. A lot of whiff blocks. Sometimes he's over anxious to the second level where he's like running past the spot, climbing to the second level. So like, if you can get him to like take an Adderall pill, like shove an Adderall pill down his throat, like
which you
I
can't
think,
do in the NFL, by the way. We found that out.
Right. But like a metaphorical Adderall pill, give it to Jonah and say like, you're good now. You have a really, really good football player, and everybody I've talked to about him loves him, but like there has to be a little bit more control.
I wonder if he's taking ashwagandha. Ashwagandha can help with that. It can kind of bring you down, bring you centered a little bit more. He might not want to kill people so frequently on the field, but I mean, but that's part of what makes him so much fun to watch as well, is that killer instinct that he has. And for me, he's a guy that I really like and I'll believe in until I'm forced not to believe in him when it comes down to actually grade him, in the upcoming class.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I still think, not giving that space, and maybe that's why, because I saw those oversets. I was like, just please kick him inside
No,
because
it makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. And I think I have some questions about his length as well. Like, I don't think he's 32-inch short, but I don't know if he's 33.5-inch long, arm
Hmm.
length wise. So,
Another thing that I wrote down was that he is susceptible even on the arc to guys who have good hands.
yeah, and that's another thing. I think he throws early, so that's part of
Yeah.
the over aggressiveness as well. I think he throws his hands way too
Hmm.
early, way too early. So, just like sit back, take a beat, let it come to you a little bit more, and we're good to go. We're cooking. Um, the next place to probably go in this offensive tackle class is to the other school that has two of them who are draft eligible and who get talked about. So
I guess we
uh,
could.
we could. We both. I think I'm higher on one than Dalton is, but I think we're
Hmm.
both in consensus on the other one. But we're going to Eugene, Oregon now, to the Ducks. Left tackle Josh Conerly, right tackle Ajani Cornelius. Let's start with Conerly. I think we have the same concerns. I think that main concern is a little bit more correctable. Again, I could get burned on this like I did with balance and base, but uh, with Conerly, the place to start, the place to talk is that his core is Charmin soft right now.
Yeah, I don't do Pac-12 offensive tackles who can't anchor. Like I'm just at this
Yeah.
point, unless I see it this year, I'm just kind of out on him at this
Mm-hmm.
point. To me, if somebody can just say, "Hey, I'm going to run through your face," that's all I have to do in this game. I don't
Yeah.
have to do anything else, and they can consistently do that. I mean, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 times in a single game where you are not just getting bent backwards, because if you get bent backwards, you can still anchor. If you are getting your legs up to where your ass is and you land on the ground on your ass, that's a problem because now you're running into Bo Nix as he's trying to pass within 2.5 seconds. So, for me, I'm just completely out on him at this
Mm-hmm.
point, and it's because of that. The physical tools are obvious. You can see, and again, athletic, Pac-12, left tackle. We've seen this script play out before in a former first round pick. Um, to me, if you don't have, it's like arm strength in a quarterback. You don't need all of it, but you need to have a requisite ability to anchor as an offensive tackle. And right now, he just doesn't have it. So I can't. I'm
Yeah.
out.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, the shortest I'm out ever, the meme of the shark
Hmm.
thing. But yeah, I get it because his core strength is bad. Like it's putrid. I think he has the frame if the weight room were addressed and if the core strength were addressed properly in the off season. Um, I think he has the ability to put that on. I think his hands are another big issue, and I think a lot of his core strength might be able to be solved if he can get his hands within himself as well. At least give him another layer of protection to keep defenders out of his chest. And so I think there are some both physical and technical areas
Yeah.
for improvement, but that's a lot to ask of a prospect in one offseason before the NFL draft as well. And I acknowledge that. I think I'm desperate because this is, again, not a great tackle class.
Oh, you're definitely desperate. We're both
Yeah,
desperate.
yeah. But his lower half tools, man, are rare. And I think it's like the pendulum swing. Like his lower half tools are way up here because his foot speed is tremendous. His kick step is tremendous. He is explosive. He can get wide. He can climb. Like that dude moves like a tight end, but he's also got the play strength of a tight end as well,
Mhm.
right now. So he's a pretty complex prospect to kind of figure out. He can run the arc with anybody. He can set wide with any speed. He can match speed. I think the knee bend is there, but again, like, why would anybody try to run the outside shoulder on him if they know they can just go take the quickest path with the quarterback and go right through him?
Yep.
And so that's a big issue. And I think that's probably all the time we need to spend on Conerly because
Yeah.
we've documented his strengths and weaknesses pretty easily. The man across from him, the right tackle, Rhode Island transfer. I think he gets a lot of hype because he was like a 4 or 5 star when he went back to the portal from Rhode Island to Oregon. He was very highly rated as a transfer, and he's a good player. Like he's a good Pac-12 tackle. Like I'm not trying to say this guy's not good, but like when I consider him as an NFL prospect, like I think he's just a guy. Like I don't see a physical tool that you can that improves. Like, I think his play strength is average. I think his lower half is average. I think his hands are technically there. So like, I think he does a lot really well because he's pretty technically good. But he's another guy that's just like, yeah, he's a good tackle at the college level, but like, how does a good tackle in the Pac-12 transition to the NFL? Is that still a good tackle, or is that like he's a below average tackle / swing tackle backup guard level player? And that's kind of where I struggle with Cornelius. Again, I think he's maxed out his frame and his his frame is pretty maxed out, like to the max. Like he's as big as he can get. He's as fast as he can get. He's like what we talk about with Bo Nix. Bo Nix is maxed out as a quarterback. His arm isn't getting stronger. He's not getting faster. He's been in college for 5 years under 2 systems. I don't think his processor speed is going to get any better. Like what you see is what you get with Bo Nix. Same with Cornelius. And how that transitioned to the NFL for me is like a 5th round player.
Yeah, he's a swing tackle guard. He's the guy that you get on the roster and you hope that he can just survive until your starter gets back.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is, because like you said, like technically he's pretty good and he's a good enough athlete to play at the NFL level, but there's no physical tools there, and the consistency certainly isn't there to make up for the lack of elite physical tools. So yeah, he's just kind of a guy, and that's a thing to say like as a negative, but it's not really a negative. It's just, it is what it is. And when you're looking at a class like this, just a guy might end up being a 3rd round pick, and a guy who ends up starting for a little while in his first contract. And that just, kind of goes with the territory of a class that doesn't look super talented overall.
Yeah. And I think the big difference with talking about Conerly and him is like, I kind of have this designation when I grade, and you probably do too, and scouts do for sure. But like, there has to be this upside designation to a prospect as well. Like Conerly, I do
have it in my numerical grading system.
Yeah. So like Conerly, I can say right now, this guy's like a 4th, 5th round prospect, but I think he has top 75 upside. Cornelius, I'm saying this guy's a 5th round prospect, and he's got the upside of a fit. Like the upside, there's no upside. There's no upside. Again, I think the goal for a guy like Cornelius, obviously, is to become an NFL starter and get that second contract. But like, if that's a guy who can hang on a 53-man roster, even if it's the bottom 3 slots, the bottom 4 slots on a 53-man, like that's a good career for him. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I envision Cornelius becoming, is that backup guard who can probably play some tackle if you really need him to, but like physical tools are maxed out, frame is maxed out, not a lot of punch, not a lot of play strength. You could put him in and sandwich him between a tackle and a center, a really good tackle and a center, and you could get adequate play.
Who was the Arizona Cardinals center a while back who wasn't a great athlete? I think he might have played at Penn State, but he used to talk with Pat McAfee back when McAfee like originally had his show, and I can't think of his name, but he wasn't a very good athlete, and you never really thought he would end up being a starter, and then he started for like 3 or 4 years.
Is this before Rodney Hudson?
Yeah, it was before Rodney Hudson. And so for me, I kind of look at Cornelius as if he has his career.
AQ Shipley,
that's exactly who I was thinking of. If he could have AQ Shipley's career, that is the absolute ceiling for what you could see. And not at center, it would be at guard most likely. But yes, that would be a fantastic career.
Yeah, I would agree. I would be in complete agreement there. A couple more to hit on real fast. Again, this tackle class, I think, has like good mid-round depth if you want to take a chance on a mid-round guy.
Yeah, sure.
But another guy with upside that we both agreed had his upside on, and you said, hey, I actually kind of like it a little bit here. And I said, I see it. I put a 4th on him, but with, again, top 75 upside. Josh Simmons from Ohio State. San Diego State transfer to Ohio State this past year was abysmal early in the season for Ohio State. Like, I don't think I can overstate how bad his early season tape is. But then you get to his end of the season tape and you say, wait, this guy's an NFL tackle. His athleticism, his functional athleticism, foot speed, again, that flexibility is really there. But kind of the same concerns with Jonah that I had is like, his foot speed is almost like hyperactive. His like his timing when he's trying to climb. Like again, he's almost beating defenders to the spot by too much. Like he's almost overrunning the spot. I think he's like, I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold and some allergies here, but I think again he's another guy who needs to kind of take a deep breath and get back within himself, because again I think the tools are there. I do think his punch is there when he's within himself. The play strength is there. And he's not a very big dude either. So that's honestly really more impressive, as I do think he could fill out his frame a little bit more and without losing some of that functional athleticism. But the tools are there for him to be kind of in that same category as Josh Conerly, I think.
Yeah, I don't think he's as fleet-footed as an athlete, but when I watched him, I was actually more impressed with the play strength that he showed, particularly a class that kind of struggles overall with grip strength and consistency with their grip strength. I felt like his was a lot better than a lot of these other guys that we talk about outside of the top three. What I saw every once in a while was a struggle to make depth and defend the arc versus speed rushes. And that really just came down to most of the time he was in a 3-point stance. And for some reason, those Ohio State offensive tackles look in at the ball as it's being snapped and then have to locate the edge rusher after the snap and get into a 45 or a vertical set from a 3-point stance. And it's just nearly impossible if you're facing a good rusher to do that. And so he struggled a little bit there. I just don't like the way that they do that. And it's just a technique thing that I hate. And it really hurts him in that avenue. But I think what I saw from him in a 2-point stance was good. I saw him absolutely murder a Notre Dame second level defender. He hit him once, shoved him about 8 yards in the air, hit him again for another 3 yards. He fell over, and then he dove on top of him to finish him. And that is the type of nastiness that you like to see in an offensive lineman. There's a lot that he needs to improve overall. I don't think that he has elite physical tools, but when we were talking about a guy who has shown a little bit of everything, and I think has shown a little bit more consistency than anybody else in this class that we're talking about in the day 2, early day 3 range, I like him the most out of all of these guys.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. I think I have Conerly graded a bit higher, just because again, it's rare. Like his lower half is so rare. If he can figure out the hands, and I really do think it's the hands. Again, his core is not good, but I really do think if he could figure out the hands and get them inside, that some of that core stuff would be mitigated as well while he works at the core. But I think Simmons deserves to be right in that conversation. Again, I have a 4th round grade on him. So like we're talking about another guy. I mean, there's some guys who I had 4th round grades on who went 2nd round in a small draft class like last year. So like,
yeah,
again, when we're talking about this year's draft class, it is very defensive heavy. These offensive guys are going to get pushed up the board.
Yep.
They're going to get pushed up the board. And so I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking top 75, even maybe top 64 for Josh Simmons by the time it's all said and done. Again, going into year 2 as well with Ohio State in a blue blood program from San Diego State, like that makes a huge difference as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on there with Simmons, is how that offseason with in a blue blood program. It kind of worked out in his favor that Ohio State got absolutely murdered in the transfer portal that first year. And then they murdered everybody else in the transfer portal this year. But he kind of fell into Ohio State's lap because I think they got desperate. And they're like, well, take this guy. And it worked out really well for him. So one more to really hit on. I can talk about Ariante Ursary a little bit if I want to. Ranked really high in Dane Brugler's top 50, initial top 50. Dalton has not gotten to him yet, though, so we might hold off on him. But one more that I am the highest on in this, that clot that Dalton talked about, the clot of like these guys who might get pushed up the board, but they're really not like top 64 offensive tackles, is Fernando Carmona Jr. San Jose State transfer. He's playing in the SEC this year. So they're projected starting left tackle.
I'm excited to see him in the SEC.
I am as well. A little bit of background on Carmona. I saw tendencies where he threw his hands early. I think he gave defensive ends targets way too much, like way too often, getting his hands out there and just giving pass rushers targets. I think he has some waist bending tendencies, which is really funny that I'm talking about liking him when I just talked about how I don't like guys with balance issues. But I think there are some balance issues. And another one of those guys is like, oh, this guy might be a really good guard, but I gave him a 3rd round grade because he's dense. He has a really nice frame, and he's so smooth. Like I think he's just very smooth in his lower half. And then when he does get into somebody, his punch is massive. He's got a big punch. And so I can work with those two things, especially in this class. Again, we'll see what some SEC coaching does, some SEC weight training compared to San Jose State does for him this offseason. Because I do think I like his frame, but like at times I was like, you could probably lose a little bit though, especially if you're playing tackle. I think you could lose a little bit. What were your thoughts on Fernando Carmona Jr.?
So have you ever heard the phrase slow is smooth and smooth is fast? That's exactly how I feel when I was watching him. I don't think he's an unbelievable athlete, but like you said, he's smooth. And so for me, when I watched him, I really did like that. I have, down as a weakness that I saw was the average, at best explosiveness, but he is smooth and agile for what he has. He's kind of maximized his athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
I also said, he uncoils well and he shoots hard in pass pro. The two-handed strike is something that I don't enjoy all that much. And it's, something that technically he was taught to do, I'm sure, because offensive line coaches have their ways of doing things, high-low, one-hand strikes, two-hand strikes. I hate most of it that is taught. He gets a little bit high sometimes. You were talking about him bending at the waist. I think that he comes high out of his stance a little bit. But there is a lot to like from overall just a technical perspective. I thought that he displayed good positional leverage in the downhill run game. He hit his points very well. Angles are good. He targets the second level very well, and I think that he climbs well off of, double teams. Mm-hmm. And so for me, there's a lot to like in a guy who I think could, be one of those guys that you look at the end of the day and is like, yeah, 3rd, 4th round, a guy who, might not be a Pro Bowler, but a guy who might start for a contract.
Mm-hmm. And I think another note that I had down is, again, I mentioned he's a really big dude, and that shows up in how natural his anchor is. Again, I think Oregon State was the best team that he played, and I couldn't name either of Oregon State's pass rushers, but like,
no,
I didn't
and
see...
that's the tough part about it, and that's why you want to see him in the SEC, because I watched that game too, and it's like, yeah, he looks pretty good, but like it's Oregon State, and that's the best tape we're going to see against him. And against offensive linemen especially, I want to see you against the absolute best competition. Like if I'm watching a wide receiver, I want to watch the game where you had 18 targets, obviously. But for me, when I'm watching an offensive lineman, I want to see you go up against your best competition, because you're not going to get an easy day at the NFL level.
Yep.
And so for him going to the SEC, I think is huge for him. It's huge for his evaluation. It'll make things very, very easy, because you'll see him against very good competition.
Yep. And another guy where I say he might be a pretty darn good guard.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our little primer on offensive tackles right there. Nice little primer there. All right. Next week, wide receivers, running backs are on the docket. So that's a lot of players to watch, though. So we're gonna kind of burn through it here. So but the running back class is so fun. So I'm really excited to talk about the running backs. In a class where we said the offensive talent isn't very good. The position that is the position where the value
the position that doesn't matter is the one that's really good. So
so that'll be a lot of fun to talk about. But we'll get into that tape, and we'll get back on the podcast next week. Dalton's back from vacation, so I am going to be out for my anniversary over Labor Day weekend, but hopefully Dalton and I can double up on some recordings.
When is your anniversary?
September 3rd.
Mine's the 2nd.
Oh, nice. We intentionally did it on Labor Day weekend, so we had a 3-day weekend every anniversary.
That's really smart. I did not do that. I was 16 at the time.
Oh, you got married at 16?
No. That's when we started dating.
Oh,
geez. That is also when we got married.
Oh, geez. Okay, I was gonna say.
I didn't want to remember multiple anniversaries, so I said we're gonna get married on the same day that we started dating.
That works. That's perfect. But again, Dalton and I have doubled up and recorded multiple episodes in one sitting. So that's probably what we'll do to cover that little gap there. And I'll get it all scheduled out. So, but yeah, I think that's it. Dalton, anything else to add before we blue skidoo and weekend 2?
No, I hope you guys enjoyed week 0 of college football because I'm sure that I did. Future me did.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, until next time, this has been the Daft on Draft podcast.
Welcome